In today's video, I'm going to be painting a deer. Now I know I have done a deer in gouache recently on my YouTube channel, but I don't know why I really felt like drawing a deer again. And I've got a lot of ideas for a simple illustration, not a complete illustration, but something simple. But I was just sitting down one day and sketching in my planning sketchbook. I was just sketching in some different reference photos that I found of deers, and I was just getting a feel for how I'm going to draw them, and looking at the shape and getting some sketching done. I have been doing a lot of painting lately, but I wanted to do some sketches in graphite, so I just was getting some of those sketches in and just enjoying my session sketching with my graphite pencil and just creating these illustrations or these sketches, which I'm going to turn into an illustration. They are the finished sketches for the deers. Now from here I am going to use this reference photo, and that's going to be the illustration that I'm going to create in my watercolor sketchbook. So I'm using the same graphite pencil, and it's a HB graphite pencil, and I'm just sketching in the outlines of the deer just so I can get an indication of a guide to help me when I'm going in with the painting. But I am taking note of the different shapes of the shadows, the highlights, the way the light is hitting the deer. I'm just taking note of that in my mind as I am sketching, because that's what's going to really make this picture look really interesting. Although it's a very simple illustration, I'm not really making it very complicated. I'm just looking at the proportions and trying to get the proportions right. That's very important when drawing animals. If you want them to look correct, you need to get the proportions as accurate as possible. Also, another thing to remember when drawing animals, pay attention to their skeletal and muscular structure, because that really helps you to get their form right and to really get them to look realistic. Now, I'm not talking hyperrealism, but I want them to look as realistic as possible, and it must resemble a deer. So you can see I got the proportions right, I captured them, and now I'm going to just refine my sketch and just note the different areas where the shadows are going to be and some of the details on the hooves. And I'm just basically working through the piece and adding those little details here and there that I think will really help me to define the sketch, so that it makes it easier when I am doing my painting. Then I know when I'm going over with the paint how I can go about keeping the highlights light and the shadows dark, and then making those values right so that it can look realistic. So you can see I just refined that. Now I'm just using a kneaded eraser to lighten up the entire sketch, just so that it is light, so it doesn't show, the graphite doesn't show through on the final painting with watercolors. And then I'm using some masking fluid just to mark off some of those white areas that I want to retain the white of the paper. Now honestly, I'm not too sure how I feel about masking fluid, because I have never used it. This is my first time actually using it, and I think it was actually my fault. I went too much with the masking fluid, so all those little spots are a bit too busy on the back of the deer. I think I should have kept it a bit less. So I think that's why I wasn't too happy with it, but it's fine. I did afterwards at the end, once I removed the masking fluid, correct that. But yeah, I think it was a bit too much that I put. But once the masking fluid was dry, I went in with some diluted gouache. This is a reddish brown color that I had on my palette, so I was just using it for the deer. But I am going to move to my watercolors after this. I just wanted to get that little reddish color in, and then I'm going to go over with my brown burnt sienna mix of watercolors. So you can see this is where I'm going in with my burnt sienna and burnt umber. Sorry, I'm using burnt umber and burnt sienna for this. This is just to capture all the darker areas and the shadow areas, and I'm just trying to capture all of that. And you'll see the areas where the masking fluid is, the paint doesn't catch on that area, because those areas are going to be retained, are going to be retaining the white of the paper. So you can see I'm just covering the entire deer. Now I'm using a mix of a burnt umber, and then I'm using some burnt sienna. So it's a mix of the two colors. I'm trying to keep the burnt sienna in the lightest areas and using more burnt umber in the darker areas. Now as I'm painting, I am going to darken some areas as I go forward. This is just to try to get the white of the paper covered. You saw over there with the front leg, I was just using a damp brush to lighten the color of the leg, just so that it has a bit of that white color, because that area is a light color on this particular deer. Now I'm just painting in the back legs and also adding some of the fur. Now, like I always say, you don't have to add every single strand of fur. You can only add what is necessary to depict the texture of fur and to make the animal look realistic. But you don't have to add too much, otherwise it's going to look unreal. So now I'm adding a mix of burnt sienna and raw umber, and I'm just adding it to for the base. It's a very light base. It's mixed with a lot of water just to cover the face area. And then now I'm going in with a darker brown just to get those outlines and some parts of the ears painted in, as well as the face. I'm trying to focus more on the shadow areas at the moment, and then from there I'm going to go in with the lighter colors a little later. So as you can see, I'm taking my time. I'm not rushing it. Although this video is sped up, I'm still taking my time with it. I'm not rushing it. It's very important to remember to observe your reference as closely as possible and take notes of the highlights and the shadows, and then incorporate that into your drawing. Also remember where the light source is coming from, the direction of the light source, so that you are able to determine where the areas of the deer will be light and which areas will be the shadow or be in shadow. So you can see I'm just adding some details to the deer, and I'm keeping it very simple, very relaxed. I'm not really making it very complicated. It may look like I'm making it complicated, but honestly I'm just following the reference and keeping the dark areas dark and the light areas light. Remember, when you are creating an illustration like this, it's very important to enjoy the process and have fun with your art. It's not necessarily that it has to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be the best artwork that you made. It just needs to be a process that you enjoyed and your time creating, and that's what matters the most. So there I added the eyes and I completed the nose, and then now I'm just adding more shadows. I'm just adding a little bit of a pink tone to the ears, to the inner ears, and then darkening up some of those edges of the ears as well. That just helps to make it look cohesive than having just completely pink ears, because that's not realistic. And I'm also adding some of the shadow areas with the darker brown. Now that is so important when you are painting a illustration or anything, just to keep observing your reference photo and think how you want to incorporate that into your drawing. So now I'm just removing the masking fluid, and as you can see, this is what I meant by it's very spotty, and I wasn't too happy with this because I think it was too spotty all over. So you can see now I'm going in and I'm refining the tail, adding more shadows and darkening some areas. I'm also darkening some of the shadows on the legs. Now this is so important to, at this stage, to determine what you want to cover. You'll see I'll be covering up a lot of that white, especially the little bits of white here and there on the spots. I'm going to be covering that up, but I think that was a mistake on my part. When I applied the masking fluid, I think I applied too much and I made too many spots on this deer. Although the reference did have a lot of spots, but I think I could have toned it down a bit. But as you can see, I'm just now adding more details to the deer, adding more shadows, darkening those colors a bit. Okay, now I started adding some white just to lighten up some of those areas that are actually light of the deer, because it was gone a bit too dark and now I want the white to show through. So I'm going through and adding on the neck and the face some white. Now I'm going in with some color pencil. I think color pencil is great to add some final details and to also refine your illustration, as well as to add some texture to your painting. So you can see now I'm starting to work with the white color pencil and just lighten up some areas. And then now I'm going over the spots and with a brown pencil, and this is just so that I can cover up some of the areas where I think it's a bit too brown, especially the little specks here and there. I try to cover those because I think the larger spots are fine, but those tiny specks here and there, I think it was overdoing it with the spots. So I'm just removing some of those and coloring them in. I'm also really refining the shadow areas for the entire deer. So if you haven't tried using a color pencil over watercolors, I highly recommend. You can even use color pencils over your markers if you want to add textures or any fine details, or you want to just really refine certain things. I think color pencils are great for that. Now I'm just using a white jelly roll to add the highlights in the eyes and to just bring some of that white back for some of the white hairs on the fur, as well as some of the spots. I'm just adding some with the white pen. I think that looks a little bit better, not having that harsh white that I did have with the masking fluid, all of them. I'm just adding some of the smaller ones that are better. And it's at this point that I decided just to add a little bit of a scene in which the deer is in. So add a bit of grass around its feet and around it, just to signify that he is standing on the grass, because I think that really will help to make it look like complete. They're just having him standing idly on the grass where there's no grass, and just a blank white page. And then I also felt it looked a little empty, so what I did is I just wet the entire page around the deer, and I just started adding some blotches of green onto the wet paint. So that started spreading out nicely, and then I started to just take the brush with some more water and just blend those green spots into the background. And I think that's the perfect way to use the wet in wet technique, because that way you can get some really smooth, interesting blending with the colors. And I think it really makes the deer stand out, and also not only stand out but look like it belongs in a scene, and it's not just standing in mid-air with nothing around it. You can see that that could basically be foliage in the background. Also just refining some of those leaves and grass around the deer. And then I'm just using some darker shades just to really cover up that grass and really make it look a bit more three-dimensional. Also letting some of it overlap over the deer's feet, just so that it looks more realistic and it looks cohesive, the entire piece, because it goes together and you don't have the deer being separated from the grass. And there we have the completed deer illustration. So I guess that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. If you have, don't forget to like and share. It really helps the channel out. Also, leave your comments down below, and if you'd like to see videos like this and other art inspirational and art videos that I put up on my channel, then you could consider subscribing. Just a reminder as well that I am on Patreon, where I offer exclusive videos and tutorials and lessons and other benefits, as well as real-time videos. So if you'd like to check that out, then you can check out the link down below for my Patreon. Till the next one, bye!